So if you could interview one person, who would it be? My choice probably wouldn't be Bundy, but at least it makes for a very interesting film. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass, and I'm here to talk to you about the true crime drama No Man from God, which already released in theaters, on demand, and digital on August 27, 2021. So I know I'm late to the review here, but I kind of slipped my mind, and I just watched it last night, and I was very impressed by the film. I'm going to go into a little bit about the film, three things I liked, three things I didn't love, and then talk about the ending. So, as you can imagine, there will be spoilers. If you don't want to know anything about the film, go turn this off, go watch the movie, or check out the review on watcherpass.com. There's no spoilers there. And you can come back and watch this after you're done. But if you just want to know more about the film, want to see kind of what the subject matter is, then let's go. No Man of God focuses on Bill, who's a FBI profiler played by Elijah Wood. He was a real person. The film is kind of based on the series of interviews of serial killer Ted Bundy that forms some of the basis of how the FBI does profiling. According to the film, and I think this is probably accurate, at least at this part. The FBI went out and interviewed a bunch of serial killers just to kind of try to get into their heads, try to figure out kind of what motivated them, what made them tick, and they used that to then kind of start the science of profiling, of doing criminal profiling, trying to look at crimes and kind of figure out what that person was like. And so you have Bill, who is interviewing Bundy after he is set for execution and kind of before he's going to be electrocuted. Bill spends some time with him to try to understand him. Doesn't even really want to get him to confess anything. He just wants to understand Bundy's mindset and understand what makes him tick. And so the film is mostly about them. It's a very different true crime film than I expected. I didn't really know what to expect, but it is a lot of interviews. It's a lot of talking, and it's in that sense, it's pretty similar to True Story, which was another true crime film. It dealt with a reporter interviewing a notorious family annihilator, and that film was very chilling. It had Jonah Hill and it had James Franco, and they did a very good job with that film. And I don't want to ruin that movie because it's a good movie, but it has a very, very unsettling scene that I think is the most unsettling scene I've ever seen in a movie. And if you want to know more about it, ask me in the comments. I just don't want to put it in the video because I don't want to spoil that movie for people. I don't want to spoil two movies in one. So, so in that respect, it's similar to True Story because it's just essentially these two people talking. Although True Story had more reenactment in it, this film is mostly just interviewing. So it will appeal to a very specific kind of movie fan. If you're a fan of true crime or true crime podcasts, you will probably like this because there was a lot of talking, there's a lot of discussion. Not so much reenactments. It's more of just kind of Elijah Wood and Luke Kirby, who plays Ted Bundy, just chatting, like discussing Bundy, his crimes, but it's also just kind of them trying to feel each other out and kind of get each other's trust. So if that sounds interesting to you, you will like this film. But I preface this is something that will appeal to a very specific type of movie fan. I loved it. I thought this film was kind of a breath of fresh air and very different. And I want to go into things I did love about it. The first is, it's a true crime film, so it deals with Ted Bundy and it deals with Elijah Wood, and it kind of it goes into a lot of kind of the psychological aspects of Bundy and kind of Bundy's character without a lot of the gory details. So in that respect, it was a very interesting, different true crime film. Like sometimes you will see a true crime film that shows the murders or shows the actual crimes. This actually doesn't have any of that, which was a very interesting take. I'm going to criticize a little bit later in the things I didn't love about it, but overall, this film was a kind of fresh true crime approach, and I think it was, so I think this was a better Bundy film than Zac Efron in Extremely Wicked, Shocking, and Vile. In Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile, you'll notice a cut because I had to look at my phone a few times for that title. But and that's not to take away from Zac Efron. Zac Efron is a good actor. I really like Efron, and I'm an Efron fan, but I think that Luke Kirby's Ted Bundy was a very interesting kind of nuanced character. It felt like kind of maybe more true to life of how he was. He was from what I understand, he was a very charismatic person. He was able to kind of gain people's trust. He was able to kind of charm people, but then he also did some really terrible things. But I think Kirby has more of the natural charisma because his character is very compelling. Like the way that he kind of approaches the discussion and kind of remains guarded and then opens up. It makes for a very interesting thing to watch, and I really appreciated that aspect as well. So the second thing I love is the cast, and this is a small cast. It feels like a small indie film, but you have Elijah Wood and Luke Kirby as the main characters, and they are fantastic. They have a really great rapport together. The film is basically them talking to each other the entire time, and so you get a nice kind of cat and mouse where they're trying to feel each other out and get each other's confidence, and then when they do kind of get each other's confidence, you can see them become friends. And then when kind of Elijah Wood, I think he kind of catches himself becoming friends because then you kind of pull back to some of the terrible things that Bundy does when he does open up to Elijah Wood. So you get this really interesting kind of push and pull throughout the film that is kind of brought to life by this great cast. And again, Luke Kirby does a really, really good job as Bundy. He is kind of compelling. He's interesting. He's charismatic. And then towards the end, when he kind of opens up a little bit more about his crimes, he is chilling and kind of animal-like in some parts. So I think it's a very good cast, and kind of they have to be to make this movie actually work. And the last thing I really loved, and I kind of touched on this already, is just the conversation. I mean, the style of this movie is very different from a lot of dramas and even true crime dramas because it is mostly just conversation, which is, again, will appeal to a specific type of fan. I loved it. I thought it was I thought it was compelling. I was kind of drawn into it the entire time, and just kind of listened with bated breath throughout the movie. So those are the three things I liked. Three things I didn't really love is, for the first thing, and kind of the most, I think, important thing, is that they sugarcoated Bundy a little too much, I think. And that's not to say they didn't try to like make it seem like he wasn't a murderer. I mean, they talked about his crimes, they talked about his murders, but they didn't go into some of the specifics that I think you need to really understand how much of a monster he was. I mean, they kind of talk about all the people he's killed, all the lives he's run, but they don't go into some of the specifics that I think really paint a picture of this person. The one time they do go into a murder, it's at the end, and it is a shocking kind of discussion because of he goes into some detail on what happened. But Bundy was a really violent person sometimes, especially when he went into his berserker mode. Like there were some corpses that had like the boot print from when he like stepped on their chest, or there was one victim who had bite marks on her from him like actively biting her. I think it was before she died, and like actual full like teeth impressions. So and obviously he was also a violent murderer. I think he murdered some people with he was a violent person who just kind of went on a rampage. So and he went on a rampage at Florida State, which is kind of where his kind of like most notorious crimes were. But he was a killer for a very long time and did some really terrible things. And the film just kind of, it doesn't mention some of those specifics. It kind of talks about he killed people, he killed a lot of people, he killed he had a lot of victims, but it doesn't go into some of these specifics that I think really paints him as the violent monster that he was. So the second thing I didn't really love is that there was no reveal at the end to kind of show what these people look like. And that's one of my favorite things about movies based on a true story, is at the end they'll have pictures of the people that it was based on, have a little bit of context about them. And I guess you didn't really need much context about Bundy because you knew what happened to him at the end of the movie. But like for Bill, they did have some text about his career, but I didn't see a picture of him. And I also would like to see a picture of Bundy and maybe hear some of the actual interview tapes, because I think they might have played some at the start. But now that you've seen the interviews and know the characters, I wish they would have had some more of the actual interviews. And I wonder if maybe they didn't do that because the interviews themselves were very different from how they were portrayed in the movie. I'm not sure. I haven't listened to the Bundy tapes, but it was just kind of weird that they didn't have them. Like even playing over the credits, I thought would have been an interesting way. Just kind of like having some highlights of some of the interviews themselves would have been a good way to end this film. And the last thing is, it does feel like there were maybe some creative liberties taken. Now, I tried to look online to see how close this was to the real interviews. I didn't find much information yet, but it does feel like maybe some of the timelines were blurred for the movie, which does happen. But again, that's the risk you run with a based on true event story. And I would have really loved to see kind of how accurate this film was versus the actual conversations. I imagine maybe some of the dialogue was changed. Maybe some of the timing was changed as well. But overall, the three things, except for the sugarcoating Bundy part, were mostly minor. But I still think this is a very good movie. Now, going into the ending, this film has Bill and Ted discussing Ted's crimes kind of in the 11th hour, right before his execution. So as you imagine, the film builds towards the execution. And spoilers, you all know this if you follow anything about the news. Bundy was executed. He didn't get pardoned or anything. So before the execution, kind of after they've really be kind of after Bill and Ted, oh, I just got that. After Bill and Ted have this kind of excellent adventure, and they they trust each other. They basically become friends. They then go on this bogus journey when Ted really opens up and tells Bill about an actual murder. And so this is where the film switches from kind of a more friendly tone, and then you get to see Bundy in kind of a more cold, calculated killer version. And he doesn't become like aggressive, but you can see in his kind of tone, it becomes almost like animal-like in how he's describing the murder. And this was the first time that you really get to see how much of a monster he was. And like I said, I wish that they would have had maybe some more details to really frame it, but this was a very good way to kind of have a stark contrast between like the Ted that you kind of have known from this movie and kind of the relationship that he and Bill had developed to like Ted the serial killer. And so after Bundy opens up to Bill about this, Bill gets interviewed by the execution board to kind of determine whether Bundy should still be executed. And before this, you kind of heard that essentially his lawyer was going to say good things. I think the judge was going to say bad things or something along those lines. So it was kind of going to kind of balance out. Maybe the victims' families would have said bad things. And so they thought that maybe it would all come down to how Bill discussed Bundy and whether or not he should get a stay from execution. Bill gets interviewed. Ted still, is going to be executed, so he doesn't get a pardon or anything. And so after they get this news, Bill sees Ted's lawyer, who is this attractive lady named Carolyn, played by Aleksa Palladino, and she's clearly upset. And Bill implies, you should go home to your husband and kids, essentially like implying what was kind of built into the implication earlier that her and Ted have some sort of relationship. And she has a great retort. Like she basically comes back to him and says, "You should go home to your kids and family. Like everyone thinks that I have a relationship with Bundy. I don't." She basically then talks to him about why she's defending him. Essentially, she's saying he's a murderer, he's a monster, but if we execute him, we are also murderers. And so she kind of is trying to defend Bundy so he doesn't actually get executed. Like she still wants him in jail and still thinks he's a bad person, but she doesn't want him to be executed. So then, Ted is then prepared for the execution. They shave his head. He kind of gets a last prayer, and then it's his final scene with Bill. And essentially, Ted thanks him for being there, for being a friend. And he also says, everyone else who kind of came to me wanted something from him, but Bill just kind of wanted to understand him. So it's a very touching scene. They're kind of at the 11th hour. Ted is about to get executed, and then you kind of get the not crazy, but you get kind of like the last moments scene, which was interesting. Ted threatens to kill himself just to kind of maintain some control because he doesn't want to give the state the benefit of that. But then Bill convinces him. He says, "No, you have to go through with it. You have to get executed because you're getting executed to make right, to kind of give the families the justice that they deserve." Essentially, he says, if you kill yourself now, then those families don't get to think that you died for their daughter. So then they kind of talk a little bit about religion, and then Ted starts ranting about the execution, saying, the governor screwed him. He only gave him 7 days before his execution. He could have given him 30 or 60 days, but he gave him 7 because he wanted a political move. And Bill gets mad at him for this. He essentially says, like, you had 7 days to make, get your affairs in order, make right, make peace. Like, how many of your victims had that chance? And it really kind of frames Bill. And I think Bill had been kind of holding back up to this point because he wanted to understand Ted. And also I think he did start to like him. Like Ted Bundy was a charismatic person. And I imagine if you were talking to him for a while, he would, the charm would kind of wear on you, and you might even think you were friends. But then here is when Bill kind of opens up on Ted and kind of shows how much he, I think, despises him. At least despises what he did. And so then, Bundy then says, you should kill, so you think they should kill me? You think it's my time to die? And Bill says, frankly, it should have been done a long time ago. So then, it's time to go, and they have this kind of last conversation, and Bundy asks Bill, will I see you there? And he says, yes. And then Bundy asks him, did you get what you came for? Do you know why I did it? And Bill says, because you wanted to. And then Bundy tells him, well, hope to see you on the other side. And Bill says, could be. And so Bundy's taken away. And then you find out that the warden doesn't have a seat for Bill anymore. Bill was supposed to have a seat, but the warden gave his seats away to like some family who were in town because it's a big event. And so Bill is not going to be at the execution. I think Bill feels bad for this because he did tell Ted he was going to be there, and he's probably the only friend that was going to be at the execution. So I think Bill feels bad for it. He calls his family to talk to his wife and kid. And he's talking to his kid, and his kid is being a cute kid, but it's very frustrating because he really wants his wife to get on the line. But his kid doesn't, his kid's like talking to him about his day and being kind of this cute, bubbly kid that's excited to talk to his dad. And then you hear some cheers from outside the prison, and Bill stands up and kind of looks out, and you don't ever get this told to you, which I actually really like. I like movies that do this. But the implication is that now Bundy is executed. The cheers are from the people outside who had gathered to hear that. And then the movie ends. And that's it. That's the way the movie ended. I thought it was an interesting end. I guess it would have been nice, maybe more impactful, to kind of show Ted in the chamber, and maybe not have him get electrocuted, but at least kind of show the process of getting him strapped up to the chair. But I do think that the movie ended in a similar way to kind of how it was. It kind of didn't have the gory details and just kind of focused on the conversation. It kind of ended with a conversation too that let you not focus on the actual execution, but then see Bill and his kid having this conversation. So that's No Man of God. I thought it was a very good movie. It was very surprising to me. I really, really enjoyed it more than I kind of thought I would. But I do think it takes a very specific type of movie fan to like it. So if this sounds like an interesting movie to you, you should definitely check it out. It's available digitally, in theaters, and on demand. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot and makes sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.